Welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. Today's guest is Jason Griffith, a husband, father, and financial advisor based in Southern California. He strives to live a life rooted in faith, service, and trust in God's providence. For over 20 years, Jason has worked with local youth as a high school and youth football coach, seeing it as a way to give back to his community and mentor young men. Though he was raised in the church, Jason also considers himself a convert, and he describes his journey into a deeper embrace of the Catholic faith as one of the greatest blessings of his life. He's here today to share that story with us. So sit back and have a listen to my interview with Jason Griffith. Well, hello, Jason.
Hi, Lori.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I appreciate it.
So it turns out that we know each other from church, but only maybe from sight.
Yes.
Because I was kind of waiting to see who you were, because Deacon Don, he was the one that kind of hooked this whole thing together with a lot of my guests.
Right.
He recommended you. So when I was speaking to you on the phone and you said, you go to Mass, and I was thinking, oh, I wonder who it is. I wonder if I recognize him. And I did.
Yeah. I had the advantage because I knew who you were, because I told you before, I'd been listening to your podcast.
So he's an actual fan.
Absolutely. So
Yay.
In my dream life, I would go to daily Mass, but I run a business, I have a family, and on a lot of days I can drop the boys off at school and make it to Mass like 3 minutes late. But if I'm running
Which is a typical Catholic entry into Mass, honestly. Right. That's actually good.
Yeah.
3 minutes
I
in.
feel okay, right. But when I'm 10 minutes or more, then I'm like, then I won't go to Mass, and I'll listen to, something that I found your podcast, and I could get the daily readings. Yeah. And then I think you call it the spiritual Eucharist at the end.
Yes, the act of spiritual communion.
Yes. Oh, and I love it. So then I became a listener and then a fan. So
good.
I got your email. It's like, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, there she is. She's haunting me. It's interesting because I actually had a parishioner who's also a listener suggest the act of spiritual communion. And so he requested me to start doing that. So I did. And I have got a very good response from that a lot of people really value that. We did that during COVID. Simon, my husband and producer, and I videotaped all the masses during COVID for our church.
Oh, wow.
For the people that nobody could attend.
Yeah.
And so that's where I heard that the first time, was for all the people at home that obviously couldn't come and receive the Eucharist. Right. And we started doing that. And, it's a beautiful prayer, and it is really, when you listen to it with just every part of your being, it's so beautiful, and it does make you feel really a lot closer to Christ, I think, when you hear it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially when you understand that the fullness of the Eucharist. So daily Mass, and to receive that, and I just love being able to do that before I enter my day and take on the battles of the day. Right. So obviously there's nothing like the real thing, but that prayer is really helpful.
Oh, good. So anyway, I'm so happy you came today, and I can't wait to hear your story. But before we get into your conversion story, I have been asking everybody in this series, I think you're guest number 4. I've been asking everybody, what's your religious background? Because in your intro, I said you were raised Catholic and you consider yourself a convert. So let's hear, how were you raised, and how did all that come about?
Yeah, so I was raised Catholic, but it didn't really start until age 12 that I can remember. So when I was growing up and I was young, it was kind of a rough situation. My dad left our family early, and there was a lot of substance abuse and things like that. So my mom raised me, and we moved around, and she brought me to New York, and I lived in Brooklyn for a while because she had to move back with her mom, and she did a wonderful job, a very strong woman, but I don't remember a religious aspect of that part of my life. It wasn't until I met my stepfather, and when we moved back to Ventura, and he wasn't Catholic, but he gave us the first family experience that I can remember. We had a dad and a mom in the house, and I think that gave her the stability to introduce me to the church, because that's when she had me baptized. I was baptized when I was 12. I went through the some classes. I didn't get confirmed, and I think I became a teenager, and then did my own thing from that point. But she did take me to Sunday Mass, and we went to midnight Mass over Christmas, and we did the during Advent, the Advent candles and things like that. So I really think that once my stepfather gave us that stability, she was able to maybe live her faith and introduce it to me.
I see. So she was raised Catholic. Then you were born, and it's not that you were born and she baptized you and then you kind of weren't a part of the church. You weren't really baptized till you were 12. So there was a period of time where you didn't really have a practicing religion, it sounds like.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And when did your dad leave? At what point of your life?
It was one of my earliest memories of him. Unfortunately, I was 4 years old and he OD'd in the house and he got wheeled out. I remember the ambulance. And then he went home with a different woman and left my mom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, when I talk about her strength and the things that she had to endure and then work full time. And so I spent a lot of time either in school or daycare. And then she would come pick me up at like 5:30, So I think the fact that she couldn't live her faith was partly exhaustion and just trying to get through life.
Sure. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
And, as a little child, sometimes people think that children don't have memories of things or like they're too little, but children are sponges, and we can't really, in my opinion, we can't know exactly how much a child remembers, but certainly things are, like I imagine like pictures of, snapshots in your brains or little mini movies where you do have a memory of things. I know my oldest son and I had a very traumatic event, and he was a baby basically when it happened, but he had memories of it that were, I would always say, tattooed on his brain because they were so impactful that they just were there. And that's the only, he was able to verbalize some things. And my husband at the time was like, he wouldn't have known that if he didn't remember. Like, we would have never said it to him.
Right.
So anyway, I'm so sorry to hear that. But I'm pleased to hear that your mom, well, first of all, amazing that your mom was such a strong woman to raise you. And then thank heaven she, found your stepfather. Sounds like he was, really needed in your family. Yeah,
he was, and it was interesting because I was raising my boys now, and I just noticed talking to other parents, I would talk about, camping. I'd be like, yeah, I started camping, I think, when I was 12. And then I would talk about sports. And I'd be like, yeah, I think I started playing sports right around 13. And I just noticed, I was like, everything that I talk about, shooting guns, being outdoors, started around 12. I'm like, what happened? My mom got married to my stepfather.
Right.
And he really was that figure who opened up that part of life for us. So this is really interesting.
So did you have siblings? Do you have siblings?
I have, I guess you can call them half siblings. My father is the common link between all of us, and we love each other very much. And, we consider ourselves brothers and sisters.
Your biological father?
My biological father.
Okay.
Yeah, so he stuck around for a while.
Oh, okay.
He started another family. He had my stepbrother. I call him my brother.
Yeah.
Each other for whole lives. He had my brother before he met my mom. So when he left my mom, my brother stayed with us for a long while.
Oh.
So my mom was juggling, both of us and trying to get that taken care of. And then my dad found some stability in his life and married another wonderful woman who's my stepmom.
Oh, good.
And she had 2 daughters who are my sisters. And my mom loved my stepmom. They really got along great.
That's
and
good.
co-raised me because I spent time over there. So that part was really good. For as much as my dad got wrong, he found just a couple of incredible women.
That's great.
Yeah, and us siblings that still have great relationships. And we're going over there today, actually, because one of my sisters from Boise is coming to Ventura, and I'm taking my boys to go swim over there.
So, that's so great.
Yeah, the families.
And that's, just, not that this is off topic, but this is like really important to talk about because, having a dad around, having a father figure is so vital to families. And there's so many studies out now that are finding that the people that didn't have a dad around, even if their mom was a strong mom like your mom, even if they were able to make it through, having that father figure, whoever that is, whether it's your biological father, stepfather, grandfather, somebody to be that role model for a boy, to have a man as his stability and his role model. It's so vital. And so many men and boys suffer from that, I feel. And so it sounds like, thank heaven you had a mom who was able to do this. I love the fact that you all are making it work as a family instead of dividing it, making it divided, where it's like a pitting each other against each other or being mad at him. And so then distancing yourself. And, you guys are doing it in the most beautiful way. And I think that's how it should be. But a lot of people just, for whatever reason, don't do that. And it's too bad.
Yeah, we're really appreciative. Absolutely. And what you're saying about the father figure, is so important. And I was just recently confirmed, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I took on St. Joseph.
Oh, nice.
As my patron saint, because I just think that's so important. And I've been a high school football coach for many years. Now I'm coaching youth football. And that's what drives my involvement there, is that me and my 5 core best friends, we were basically had no fathers in the home when we were really young. And we were running around unsupervised, doing knuckleheaded things already. And then we found football. And we found, Ron Garcia was the coach. I'll say him by name because this man is a saint in our lives.
Aww.
And he was ex-Marine, and just absolute discipline to the core. And we fell in love with it. And it's so counterintuitive because you have these, alpha kids on the street doing things, and then you get this major discipline. You think we rebel. No, we absolutely fell in love with it. And it was interesting because when, both my parents, my stepfather and my mom recently passed, and I was going through their things, and I found a newspaper article about that football coach. And it said, Ron Garcia leads football with a combination of discipline and love.
Oh.
And I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah.
That's just gravitated, or we gravitated to that. It captured our hearts. So
Interesting.
anyhow, I can see how impactful that was. And each one of us now have, families. I'm very proud of what my friends have accomplished. I get emotional talking about it.
Oh, that's good though.
Yeah, they're just great guys, great fathers. So that's, when coaching, that's what I love. And a lot of the coaches that I coached with, a lot of them have that same mentality.
Yeah.
It's about reaching out to the boys, especially with, football being that kind of alpha, physical, aggressive, type of a thing. It's a great place to reach young men.
Yes.
Give them that outlet, teach them control and all of those sorts of things, dealing with emotions, highs and lows. So that's another, blessing God has given me, is that opportunity to be there in those.
Right. And I feel like, again, that's something that we need more of. Is, I don't know if you've heard about the studies where they're saying that children today are so buffered and like what I would call wrapped in bubble wrap. Oh gosh, we don't want them to play football because they might get hurt. Oh my gosh, we don't want them to do this because they might get hurt. It's like, for heaven's sakes, it's not that we want kids to get hurt or do something dangerous or risky, but kids do things like that. Yeah. And sometimes they have to get hurt. They have to get in trouble. They have to get something, where they're just not wrapped in bubble wrap, or most kids are just sitting inside all day.
Right.
So it's like, back in the day, we would, I was just listening to the radio today and they were saying something about, remember back in the day when you would just go running outside and your mother would yell out, come back when the street lights come on.
Absolutely.
And it's like they didn't even know where we were the entire time. And then all of a sudden, we come home and, and that was the rule of the whole neighborhood though. It wasn't like one house had one set of rules. Mm-hmm. We all had that rule.
Yeah.
And I think like all the parents kind of kept an eye on everybody because we were in this neighborhood, and it was like, we don't have a lot of that these days. And I do think when there is any child, but a discipline issue where a kid doesn't have a mom and dad at home, or there's something going on, especially today, there's so much anxiety, so many, different things going on. They actually like discipline. They actually like structure. If you walked up to them and said, would you like discipline and structure? They would say no, but they do like it. And then to be a part of a team. My dad, who was a Scout executive, a career Boy Scout leader, okay? He's very well known for that. So he was a mentor to many boys who didn't have a dad around. And he had multiple boys to this day who still reach out to me, who said he took over for my dad. You know, he was such a father figure, and they also needed structure. They also wanted to be a part of a group. They also wore a uniform. There's that, not bad pride, but pride and dignity in that.
Self-esteem.
Yeah, self-esteem. And then boys need to be able to be boys and be able to knock each other around.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I have 2 sons and I have a daughter. And I remember when my boys were little, I was not raised with boys. And my husband was raised all boys. So they're rolling around and I'd say, what are they doing? And he goes, they're being boys. And then our daughter would cry at the drop of a hat and he'd go, why is she crying? Why is she crying?
Yeah.
Because she's a girl. She's emotional. It's fine. She'll be fine. Anyway, but I do think that is so amazing. And that's so inspirational to me, because I think we need more men like you who are, you know, you and your friends. I think that's amazing. I think we need more, you know, things that boys can do, that boys were, you know, because men are bashed these days. Boys, you know, they're getting this bad rap, which I am totally against. And I feel like, I think it's great to be a boy. And I think it's great to get out, you know, like your boy things. But I also think it's good for boys to have good male role models who also are going to be, like you were saying, giving them responsibility with it. Like, hey, out on the football field, go ahead, pound it out. But then, you know, you don't want to beat your girlfriend. You don't want to get in fights all the time. You got to learn to control yourself. These different things, you know, learning to be a good man.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, it's just all about, you know, a lot of parents will ask, you know, should my son play football? You know, and I say, well, sometimes if a kid has a little gladiator in him, you know, that's just going to be the right avenue for them.
Right.
The right platform for them to do that. And you really do teach self-control, right? Because we really rev those emotions high.
Yeah.
Right. But if you get a 15-yard penalty, if you disrespect coach, or you do something out of line, as a coach, your job is to be firm but fair. Yeah. Right. Yes. And as long as you set those boundaries and enforce them consistently, people thrive under that situation. Right. You know, and you get these, you know, like I said, you know, out of all these chemicals entering their body, going through puberty and all that kind of stuff. You give them that outlet, teach them the responsibility, they're going to have a good citizen at the end. Right. You know, and that goes for honestly anything. If you really think about it, it's like, even if a boy doesn't want to play football, you know, just something that they can, you know, that it can be, I feel like, to do masculine things. My sons didn't go towards sports. One was a musician, one was an artist. So that, you know, we supported that. Our daughter was the athlete. So it's like, I think whatever their thing is that they're passionate about, maybe it's a different sport, but to have those ways to get out their aggressions or get out their spirit or whatever, but also to teach just these different things instead of just sitting at home like a bump on a log. Absolutely. Like my oldest boy, he's into football and basketball, the sports guy. My youngest boy, he's into theater. Oh, see? And yeah, absolutely. And I've always told him, I said, find your thing. Yes. You know, and your thing doesn't have to be my thing. Doesn't have to be your brother's thing. And so my son who's into theater, you know, I'm just so impressed that he approaches it with, you know, with discipline and with responsibility and joy and courage, you know, so he does all of those things in a different venue. Right. You know, but equally impressive. Well, and see, that's also very important for other men and dads to realize is some dads get really fixated on, well, my son is going to do what I did in high school or in sports, and he's going to do that. And I don't care if he tells me no, he has to do it. Well, I think that's not that great. And it sounds like you have a really good attitude. I know we have a grandson that's also into theater, and he is thriving in that. His dad would like him to go the sports route, but his gift is in music and theater. Absolutely. And so, you know, Simon and I are like kind of mega fans. I'll speak for myself. I've been a mega fan now because now he's like starting to do more plays, and I play this one song we recorded, and now I hear it in my sleep. So I'm a little obsessive about it. But I just think it's really great that he has something that he wants to do, that he has a gift for, and I think whatever your children have, you know. But again, let's get them out
in the world. Let's get them, you know, because that is how you teach them discipline and to have, you know, just goals of something, to have a love of something, have a passion for something. I don't think we have enough like hobbies these days. Simon and I were talking about that the other day. Remember when we would all do like, we would have hobbies, you know, like we would do stuff.
There used to be
Where's
time,
hobbies?
I think. I don't know, time is just evaporated.
No, but I mean for kids, it's like, you know, they should just be able to like have a hobby. But anyway, so that sounds really great. And then so it sounds like, then let's see, you did sounds like you got baptized at 12, but then you didn't get confirmed.
I didn't get confirmed.
Okay.
So
And then you kind of did high school and
right.
Yeah.
And was into kind of, you know, New Age philosophy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I started to go down that route, and I'll never forget, you know, walking to the living room and telling my mom some insight about something. You know, it came out of some book, and she goes, "Well, you know, they just pulled that from the Bible." And I was like, "Really?" You know? So I was like looking at the Bible, going, "Really? That's interesting." You know, so she was kind of bridging, like, you know, from where I was, and who knows what I was thinking at the time. You know, I was at least seeking truth. You know. And so I was really kind of removed from religion at that point, but seeking in my own way and probably not finding the right people along the way. But it wasn't until I was in college, and I wound up going to Humboldt State, which is up in Northern California. And I'll never forget, I was sitting on this giant rock, you know, at this sheer cliff looking down onto the ocean, just absolutely gorgeous, you know, and I just prayed. I was like, "God, I know I believe in you and I love you, but I don't get it. Like, I don't understand what's man-made religion versus, you know, where you are, you know, just help me. I'm just being honest, you know." And that was the beginning of it. I mean, it was really, from then on, I just felt like there were breadcrumbs through, you know, knock, seek, find. You know, it was just really amazing. So I went to the local Catholic church and found a priest, and I just told him what I had prayed and everything else. And he just simply said, "Well," he goes, "it seems like it's time for you to take a more mature approach to this." And he said, "So why don't you come to Mass or read the Bible? As soon as you come across something you object to or think is man-made or artificial, let's talk about it. Let's unpack it." And I was like, "Okay, that's fair enough." Right?
Yeah, can't be more reasonable than that.
Right. So I went to Mass, you know, only a couple times because I was a college student still doing my thing. But I was, you know, started to read the Bible. And then my employer at the time, I worked for the dean of the school business. You know, I told her about it, and she goes, "Oh, well, I happen to have this extra ticket to Promise Keepers." And Promise Keepers was, from what I understand, like an evangelical touring production where it was like dads and fathers getting together and big music production, but, you know, worshiping Jesus. I was like, "Sure, let's do it," because it came to our campus. So I went, and then I was just like awestruck about all these men and their faith and, you know, all of those sorts of things. So I was like, this is really powerful to me. So I started reading the Bible, and then fast forward, I got my first job, and I was flying back and forth to Chicago every week. Yeah, I was a consultant, and it was really interesting. I'll never forget, I picked up this book in the bookstore, and I was just bored, so I was looking at it. And it turns out the person in the book was about to get on a flight to Chicago O'Hare. And that's where I was going. You know, I was like, "Oh, this is an interesting story," you know. So I picked it up, and it turns out it was like a Christian novel. You know, I was like, "Isn't that interesting?" That's kind of like where my mind is right now. Let's read it, you know. And then, like, the band I was listening to at the time, the singer went through this Christian conversion, you know. And so even though they weren't a Christian band, his songs had these themes. So while I was working out, rocking out, here was God again, you know, working his way in.
He's just like slowly coming in.
Slowly coming in. And so I went to a local church, and a friend invited me to a non-denominational church. And that's where I began to go to church and develop relationships. And that's where I started to hear a lot of the anti-Catholic references. You know, "Oh, what about Pope? Oh, what about confession? Like, oh, what about Mary? What about all these things I didn't have answers to?" You know, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, you're right. You know, just the Bible. It's so simple." You know what I mean? Like, "Oh, Jesus," you know. So I went there and was worshiping with them. And then I just had this epiphany that I was like, I need to take a sabbatical. Yeah, I need to step away from my career and really jump into this. So I went to a school of evangelism, 3-act school.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was amazing. Wound up being a missionary down in Mexico and leading groups of missionaries. And meanwhile, I was didn't leave the Catholic Church, but I really was just being fed anti-Catholic stuff, and I didn't have answers to them. So I was worshiping with this other group, and trying to explain it to my mom, and it's like, oh, I just didn't quite understand it all. But I came back to Ventura, and because as I was touring, doing this missionary work, a lot of the theology and things were being told me didn't quite set true to me. I was like, there's something off about all of this a little bit. I don't know. So I came back to Ventura to visit my mom, and I went to Our Lady of Assumption. I had met Father Michael Jeanette, and oh my gosh, he changed my life. Like, what a blessing. That was a divine appointment for me to meet him. Like, I didn't know who he was, I just knew he was a pastor priest. And so I would come and I would challenge one of these questions, like, what about Mary, and like, how can you believe this? His answers were so humble, so sincere. He took time, we walked the track together, just having these conversations. And he would, he introduced me to scriptural passages, talked to me about tradition and how tradition works, with, the Bible and everything else. And I was just like, this is really amazing to me. And so when I got done with the missionary work, I was invited for a full-time pastoral position with that other church.
Oh, wow.
And I had to tell him, I said, I think I'm going to go back to the Catholic Church. And they're like, what? Haven't you been listening?
It didn't work.
Yeah,
It didn't work.
It didn't work, And the irony, it was almost like the opposite of what I was seeking. But the more history I studied, the more it confirmed Catholicism.
Yeah.
And it was just mind-boggling to me. I'm like, It was actually, I read this long book that was, I didn't know it was at the time because it was a former priest wrote the book and an honest look at Catholicism. So I was like, oh, this is trustworthy. Turned out to be really anti-Catholic, especially now looking back on it. But it drew me closer to the church. It was really, because it was some of the theology and doctrines that I was experiencing. People had this saved and unsaved perspective. And you say this prayer, you're saved.
Oh, yeah.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want, come to the service. We'll do a concert, a TED Talk, and a concert. You're good. And I was like, that saved and unsaved. Your uncle's not saved, but you are. Like, how do you know? And it's like, it's life a multiple choice thing. And you guessed right, and he guessed right. It just didn't set in. And then the more I learned about the Catholic Church, and the more I learned about, Peter. And Jesus' relationship with Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. The gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And then that's why that anti-Catholic movement was like, oh, this mistake. And I said, and the church is still here.
Right.
2,000 years later.
Right.
So with the group I was with, and there's a lot of godly, wonderful people, and that I met along the way. But at the same time, everybody had their own interpretation. And as I was leading groups, I noticed every church we went to, this pastor saw it a little bit differently. This pastor didn't like that pastor because of this. And everybody had their own take on things.
Right.
And they were preaching things like, when you have like that saved and unsaved mentality, and I was just reading about, forced conversions. And I was like, it's a mild way of repeating the same mistakes, because you can really justify anything if you think someone's unsaved.
Right.
So I was so uncomfortable with the Catholic Church. I just fell in love with its continuity.
Yes, it's stable.
It's stable. And what's really interesting, that I got back from that missionary work, I got this phone call, because I played rugby too. A friend of mine and me, we got picked up by a Scottish rugby team.
Oh.
So we were off to Scotland, right? So I played rugby there. And meanwhile, what a place. Here I am wrestling between, a Protestant church and a Catholic church in Scotland, in Edinburgh, which, the history between Catholics and Protestants in Scotland. So here I am going through my own personal thing. But that's when Pope John Paul was on like an ecumenical tour, and just everything. I don't know. It was just, again, just God just kind of walking me along this process.
Right.
But yeah, so then that really solidified, the Catholic Church as my way. And kind of a funny story is when I was with the other church, I'd completely stopped drinking, and I didn't have a drinking problem, but just a normal 20-year-old having beers. But I stopped all of that. And when we had a game in Ireland, and I like scored for the first time. And so after the game, they're like, all right, let's go, lad. They're like, here, you've got a drink for your first international game. Here's another drink because you scored on international soil, So I went to, we had a good time that night and everything. Well, I went to confession, and I told the priest, I was like, Father, I overindulged, and he's like, wow. He goes, how'd you treat people? I said, oh, we had a good time. He goes, did you get angry or violent? No, we had a good time, Ed. He goes, well, lighten up, lad. He's like,
you're Catholic.
He's like, yeah, he's like, that's how the boys get to know each other around here. You're just, having a good time. Just take it easy. And, yeah. Aww. But he's just such a charming priest when I met him. But anyhow, so that was kind of my road back to the Catholic Church. And then, but it still wasn't complete because I wasn't living what I would call a sacramental life yet. I was periodically here or there, but it wasn't until last year, and my mom was, passing away in front of me, basically. Mm. And I was holding her hand, and just thinking about all of our times together, and all that she sacrificed for me and everything else. And I was like, man, what's the number one thing that she has given to me that I'll remember forever? And it was the Catholic faith.
Oh. Yeah. So then you decided you would go in all in.
Yeah, because then I remembered, like, it just really, I was convicted that, I need to do the same for my boys.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, I need to be a good example. I lead by example. And I can only do that, be a good father, pass this along to them if Christ is right there with me, if I'm continuing my conversion story and with him. So
did your mom have the knowledge that was going to be your plan before she passed away? Did she know that you were going to fully initiate into the faith?
Yeah,
she did. Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And she would, want to go to mass with me too, but her health was never in a place that she could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's, I do think that's interesting that you went through these different phases. And, we've talked about this in this whole series with everybody who's been a guest so far, is like, God knows when to kind of enter in at the right moment where it's going to mean something.
Yeah.
You laying on that rock that day, and you're like, we're asking questions. He sees it all. He knows it all. He knows, where your interests are, where to, put these things to draw you in. Like you said, breadcrumbs. I call it like lily padding. And, it's just like these different ways to draw you in closer. And when you are talking about, again, nothing against our Protestant brothers and sisters, but for a lot of people that works. For other people, I think we look at, it's Christ Church. He founded the church. Like you said, it's been going on for over 2,000 years. Mm-hmm. He's been consistent. He does not change. We might read what the Bible says in our own way, but if you really know what he's saying and why, he's very loving and kind, but he's very firm. He loves all of us, but he doesn't like what we're up to sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I very much appreciate the stability of the Catholic faith. Like I've said in a million episodes, I don't want it to change with the world. I don't want to change with the times. I don't want it to be a bag blowing in the wind. Right. I want it to be an anchor. I want it to stay how Christ wanted it to be, because he's my goal. He's my role model. He's my everything, And I also feel like, I really do encourage people to have that, have an open heart and open mind and open soul to the Lord, because he will come, like if you're super distraught and you don't have anywhere else to turn and you're open to that, and you even just pray, Lord, help me, Jesus, show me the way. He is going to show you the way, but you have to be open to it. Yeah. And also, it doesn't matter how old you are. Like, I became Catholic when I was 49. It's like, yeah. So, I mean, it's like, I think you could be all ages, I think it's like, I'm probably not going to say this right, but I feel like, we had RCIA, now it's OCIA. I think children were brought in a certain way, and now they're bringing them in a different way. There's one little girl that comes into mind at our church. I don't know her name. She just has the little face of an angel, and she just glows with like joy when I see her. And she became Catholic. I mean, I remember just watching her with her grandma, and just this little face. I mean, every time I think about the purity of, and if we can all just have that, it doesn't matter how old you are, it's that face of just like the glow of the Lord, that's just coming out of this little child. It's so precious. But I mean, I see that with everybody, no matter what the age, when they're being initiated into the church. That's one of the things I love, is the ceremony of it all as you're going through the process. It's just so beautiful and everything. So, I mean, it's beautiful. You came in, and then your boys, were they, what's going on with their faith?
Yeah, they are. I'm so proud of them, because they love Mass, and they love the different priests that we have, and they have relationships with them. But they just finished, obviously baptized, and they did reconciliation and First Communion.
Oh, great.
So, my 13-year-old, I think it's maybe high school, and they start their confirmation course. So.
Yeah, and we have an amazing confirmation course now. We have our youth minister. She's a real go-getter. She's been a guest twice on this show. She's just amazing. She has 4 boys, and she's an amazing mother. She and her husband are amazing parents, are raising those boys. And so she's really doing a great job with that program. So hopefully you can get them into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're doing a great job, because they go to a Christian school here in town, and which has just done wonders for my kids.
Oh, good.
The teachers are all just, in love with Christ, and it's infused in their work, and the kids love their teachers and everything else. But they also recognize their Catholic identity.
Good.
And they appreciate it, and they love, Mass and going to communion and things like that.
Does the school recognize that they're Catholic, and also kind of, are they, nice about that and encouraging about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's my oldest son, and he and one other friend are the only 2 Catholics in this one history class, and the teacher asked if they wanted to share any perspective on it. It was something that they were reading. She was open to, they talked about it, but they don't know.
Yeah, but that's great that she's open to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because I, along with my older son, I'll read along the history text, because they do, favor one side versus the other, and so they had some negative things to say about the sacraments and, the vow of celibacy of a priest, things like that. They just kind of dismissed it with a couple things. So it's just a good conversation opportunity for us. I don't know. I thought, well, that's interesting, but, it's written, by a Protestant author and publishing company. So that's going to be natural. They're going to have a different perspective.
Right.
This is the Catholic perspective, and why.
Right.
So it opens up great conversation.
Well, and that's the thing, is when you learn about the faith and you have an answer, like when people ask a question, if you can have an answer, it's great when you can, because that helps. But we're going to need to go to a break. I've just thoroughly enjoyed your story. It's amazing, but we do have to go to a break.
Sounds good.
So we'll be right back. What is happening at Fresh Catholic? Thanks for asking. Well, we have a weekly podcast with lots of topics and guests, and Fresh Catholic Daily, the daily Mass readings. Listen on all platforms and watch on YouTube. I also do short videos every day on Instagram and Facebook at Fresh Catholic. Like, share, subscribe, rate, and review. These are such simple ways to help us out. The other ways you can support our mission of drawing people to the faith or back to the faith are by becoming a Patreon or sponsor. Also simple, but so needed. Our website, freshcatholic.com, has an online store with merchandise, a blog, comics, and Fresh Catholic courses with educator Charles Merritt, with the Hail Mary, the Our Father, the Virtues, the Ascension, the Magi, the Visitation, the Ten Commandments, Sacraments and Grace, Sin, Advent, Angels, Lent, Typology, and even some Bible study courses. Wow, that's a lot. Please share all of this with everyone you know and join the Fresh Catholic family. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. And we're back. Okay, so that was a really good first half. I think we went way over half, but that's okay. Right. I was very enthralled with the whole thing. No, that's really wonderful. I'm so glad that, you know, you're clicking along with the church. I just think it's such an important lifestyle change to take on. I mean, you've kind of you've had like a long process to it, but it's the process that was meant to be for you. So I think that's beautiful. So as you've kind of gone along, what has been like your favorite thing about coming into the Catholic faith? Like officially, where now you're like officially Fresh Catholic.
There's a lot of different things. One is living a sacramental life. That's really been powerful for me, because going to regular confession, going to receive the Eucharist, going to Mass as often as I can, it's just been so spiritually nourishing, you know, and it really helps my, not personal conversion, but it just helps me grow, you know, in Christ and get closer. I really appreciate having that kind of accountability, that structure. Another thing I really love is the calendar, you know, and it's so fun with the family to just have, you know, traditions. So, you know, it's one thing to try to tell your children, like, you know, Christmas isn't all about the gifts, you know, although that's the one day we're going to celebrate and that give you all the gifts, you know, but the Catholic Church, you know, we have Advent, you know, so we have a whole season leading into it, and there's colors and candles and stories, and it's just wonderful, you know, so I just get to engage my kids with their imagination and everything else, and they love it. Same thing with the Easter season and this, the various, you know, aspects and changes of colors. I really appreciate that. Another thing that I really appreciate is I like to deep dive things, you know, and one of the things I found is just, you know, the Catholic Church has really gotten a bad rap historically.
Yeah.
And so, you know, one of the things that I engaged in was like, okay, I'm gonna deep dive and look at this. I'm gonna look and see how bad is this, you know, fully recognizing that, you know, there's gonna be some warts, you know, I mean, there's gonna be a lot of, you know, mistakes, because it's you know, there's people involved.
Right, it's humans.
It's humans, yeah. Humans tend to muck things up.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. But, you know, the more I looked at some of these, you know, the Crusades, you know, it's really fascinating if you really look at that history of it, you know, and not just accept what everyone's been told or what you see in news, you know, and when you look at the, you know, Inquisitions, when you look at all of these things that are just these, you know, black eyes or bruises, you know, sure, there were some, you know, mistakes made and we got in the way. But you really explore those things, you're like, oh my gosh, you know, that was just because I received the story from one perspective.
That's right.
Not the other. But
That's
when you
right.
really deep dive the history of it, you can really see that the Catholic Church has just been tremendously valuable historically for all of Western civilization.
Right.
You know, there's no other way to say it, you know, so it's like, I just became more and more, you know, proud of the people and the saints and the reformers, you know, and all of those sorts of things, and just get, oh my gosh, the saints, you know, what wonderful examples.
Right.
Like my youngest son, Cruz, he's such a great heart, you know, and he doesn't like to make mistakes, you know, and, you know, he made a mistake one day and he's really hard on himself and he's really upset. I was able to sit down and go through, oh yeah, wait till you get a load of Peters.
Yeah,
you know?
yes.
So I started talking about Peter did this, and then Peter did that, and then Peter did this, and guess what the Lord did? He forgave him every time. And not only that, but he gave him one of the most important commissions ever in the history of humanity.
Right.
Right? So, like, be a little more patient with yourself.
Well, that's what is so great about the saints. Simon got me a book for Christmas, and it's a saint a day. And when I first got it, he said, do you know all the saints so far? I said, no. So,
No,
but I mean, there's so many of them. But I recommend that book. I'll even loan it to you next year when I'm done, because it's going to take me a year. Because but it's such a good book, because they all have, they're all human. They all make mistakes, but they all had such a love of Christ. They all, just devoted their life to him. And they're inspirational because they are human. Like it's attainable. We can all be saints if we really put our mind to it. So I think that's a beautiful thing. I was also going to mention, when you were talking about, your boys and trying to teach them things, I don't know if you're aware or if my listeners are aware, but on Fresh Catholic website, we have Charles Merritt, who does all these series for us. And he does deep dives on all these different things. I don't even remember how many we have right now, but it's our commercial right now. But it's, there's one on Advent. There's one on, Sacraments and Grace. There's one on the Hail Mary. He's done these deep dives on everything. So, people are binging Netflix. You should binge Charles Merritt on Fresh Catholic. That's what you should do.
Yeah.
He's so good at teaching. He's an educator at St. Bonaventure. So he's really good at educating people. So we were lucky enough to have him be a part of our Fresh Catholic team. And so, maybe your boys would be interested in that, because they could just kind of listen, and it is very interesting. Since you've become officially Catholic and initiated into the Catholic faith, have you been given any trouble by anybody? Do you find that people look down on you for being Catholic, or do you get a bad response sometimes?
Not openly. I mean,
not openly.
I have a couple of family members who, it's sad, because they say, "Oh, I went through catechism. I've done the Catholic thing." So, and then they'll tell me, all of these things about the Pope and Mary and all these things, and I'm like, well, you didn't get catechized.
Yeah.
Because you should recognize on the face of what you're saying, that's not the Catholic perspective on those things.
Right.
And it's just.
Do you actually say that to them, or is that what you're thinking?
No, we engage. And
because do they accept that when you say that?
No, everyone's kind of entrenched in their place,
Right.
But I have this one particular family member, and I don't know yet if he's Judas or if he's Saul about to be Paul.
Oh.
It's like, well, I don't know. It's going to be one way or the other.
Interesting.
But because he is, he loves Jesus and everything. But, you get online, and then he just forwards these memes that are just like really bad history. When you have, the ecumenical or the councils, through history, and then sometimes it'll say what dogma came out of those councils. And then he'll always, look, the Catholic Church made things up,
Right.
throughout history. And it's like, no, that's just when it became a topic of debate, and they solidified it, but, the early church, church fathers, and they always practice those things, So, we have these conversations to see what happens.
I find that the people who are like that are, they're trying to get us at something, they're like, I'm going to show you, and then when you try to explain it, they want to hear that. They're very stuck in, they don't want to hear the other side, or what maybe the answer is, I don't know if you ever listen to Catholic Answers, but when people call and they are challenging, and the gentlemen on there have an answer, hence the name, Catholic Answers,
Yeah.
But they do have an answer, and they're very calm, and they're very knowledgeable, and they know the answer. There's an answer. But the other person isn't calling to really get not all the time. A lot of people are calling to get an actual answer, and they agree. They'll,
Right.
I don't want to say they agree with it. They'll listen and they'll take it in. But then there's the people that just, on that show or in general, they want to challenge. They don't want to hear the actual thing and go, I can see that now.
Right.
It's like, it's too bad.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's too bad. But I think, we pray for people like that, and that, God will come to them if and when he sees fit, or knows that they're open to it. I guess, I don't know. That's up to God. I don't know when he does what he does.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. He's certainly surprised.
I'm so glad I don't have to handle all.
No, oh my gosh. God works in mysterious ways. And it's so interesting, just, the new Pope, which I think is just wonderful. I just love everything that, I've heard and learned about. But, as having conversations about who's going to be the next pope, he never came up.
Yeah.
As part of the conversation, and it was just like, oh, who's this? And I'm partly because we're not that in the know. I'm not. So maybe other people were talking about it, but I'd never heard of him.
Right.
And then I was like, God, you were so mysterious.
Yeah.
Because what a great choice.
Yes.
Really wonderful.
Yeah, it was a pleasant surprise, I thought.
Yeah.
And let's see, if you had an opportunity, I think when I ask you this, what I'm going to ask is, if you encountered somebody, what would you tell them about, maybe coming into the Catholic faith? I think we try to not go out and just hammer on people and knock on their door and say, hey, want to become Catholic? Here's the Bible.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
Right.
But I think, I always have been under the impression, live your life, a Catholic life, be strong in your faith. When somebody asks questions, have the answers. I think Catholics come at it in a softer way. Mm-hmm. I certainly know that I wasn't raised in any religion. I became Christian, which I jumped into that kind of like you did, where it was like, oh, I want to do this. And I kind of jumped in and I fell in love with Jesus. But it at the time, I thought it was the most amazing thing. And I knew nothing about the Catholic faith. Like I had never even heard, what I thought, and this is the first time I've ever said this because it just popped into my head when you were talking about your story, is I always thought Catholics were just born Catholic. I didn't know other people could come in. And I think I always thought that about Jewish people as well. Like you're Jewish, you're Catholic, or you're the other.
Right.
Because I didn't know anything about religion at all, you know? So when I became Christian, my husband at the time was like, anybody can be Christian. You can just go in and be Christian. Walk into any church, can be your church. Like you like that church, walk in, you're good to go. You don't like it, go to another one. It's just like,
right.
It's just as long as you love Jesus, that was what he told me. So I was like,
point.
Cool. Okay. But I don't think that's why when Simon took me to Our Lady of the Assumption Church the first time, and they're talking about RCIA, and I was thinking, I said to him, what is that? And he goes, well, you can't just be Catholic. I'm like, what? It was like so completely opposite of what my ex-husband said, where it's like, anybody. And he's like, well, you can't just like walk in and be Catholic. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what do I got to do? So I just think, that's interesting,
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think, so what I want to know is like, do you have people in your life or people that you've encountered where maybe you've been an inspiration to them and that's caused them to seek out the Catholic faith, but just because of you kind of living your life? Because again, I don't think we kind of go and like pursue people. We might say, would you like to come to Mass? Or like, like let's say you have a friend that turned away from the Catholic faith. I have a friend who was raised very Catholic. Every time I talk to her, I go, gosh, I would love it if you'd meet me at Mass. Yeah. I think that's kind of how we handle it in a way. But have you had that, or do you have people like kind of on your radar that you think maybe I'll invite them, or what would I say to them if I wanted to?
Well, I think you've inspired me to kind of start thinking that way. I think I'm trying to get my family to Mass.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah, it's a good start. But no, I need to do a better job of doing that.
Yeah.
I know I have, one person in my life who I do extend that invitation, and he'll join me every once in a while. So maybe that work has begun.
Yeah. Or I think another way we tend to, welcome people or invite people is if we have like a church event, like we have our barbecue coming up at Our Lady of the Assumption Parish. I know we have a lot of things going on, but if you can invite them to like a concert or something, just say, hey, you should come listen. It's like, and you just kind of like draw them in, or we have a beautiful Easter service, you should come, or, things like that. That's, I think, how Catholics tend to do it. But it is really good to try to, and also just by living your life as a Catholic, I know when Simon and I got married, we got married in the church in 2015. Deacon Don married us. Oh, no kidding. And one of my really close people in my life, she's like a sister to me. She's known me since I'm 3 years old. And she came to our wedding, and she's already kind of an emotional woman, and she's just so full of love and life. And after our wedding, she was just like, oh my gosh, I just want to become Catholic after coming to that wedding, because it was just so different than a normal, secular wedding, or just, I'm the wedding coordinator, so I put on a good wedding. But it is, it's a big deal, and it's so meaningful. A Catholic wedding is so meaningful and rich in just sacrament and grace and beauty, and the marriage of the husband, wife, and Christ. It's just a beautiful, unbreakable bond, and it's just amazing. And I think that events like that draw people in. I've also had people go to funerals. We have a lot of funerals, sadly, at our church, but those also draw people in, because they're like, wow, this is like, it's intense.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
I don't know if you've been to many Catholic funerals, but they're pretty amazing. And like, you don't look at it in the same way, I don't think. It's like you're imagining, oh my gosh, they're going to live with Jesus. It's like, you have that. Yeah. People are crying, people are emotional, but it's like, I don't know, it's just like, because there's the incense, and you're thinking, oh, there they go.
Yeah. No, it is. It's a beautiful thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're coming down to it here, and I have to play this game with you. Okay. The Fresh Catholic game. Fresh Catholic Path to Catholicism game. Yeah, the lightning round. No pressure.
Here we go.
No. Okay. So you know the drill. Everybody, if I'm going to give him a word or two, and he's got to give me his word or thought back. Okay. The first word is discipleship.
Community growth. Jesus.
Beautiful. The Blessed Mother.
Grace, beauty, devotion.
The Holy Eucharist.
Jesus, conversion, love.
God the Father.
Majesty, gratefulness.
The Holy Spirit.
Counselor, teacher, prayer.
And Jesus Christ.
Lord, Savior, love, compassion.
Beautiful. Look at him go. So good. So good. I love to hear everybody's answers, because, if you think about just the different things in our church, the different, we have so many things that everything means something. What's the other thing I love about the Catholic Church, Catholic faith, is everywhere you look in the church, everything has a meaning, everything has a reason, everything has a purpose. It's not just something hanging on the wall.
Right.
If you think about it, if you go and sit in there and you look around, and then like when you were in OCIA, they take you in and they talk about everything in the church.
Absolutely.
Which makes everything really mean something.
It really does.
It really does, doesn't it? And then if you go visit other Catholic churches, you look around and you go, oh, there's the Stations of the Cross.
Yes.
Oh, there's that. It's like that. It's like we're in a little club, a little Catholic club. Not so little, huge, enormous club, actually. Okay. If Jesus were to appear to you in the flesh right now, what would you say to him or do?
That's a big question. I don't know what I would say. I know I would go down to my knees and I know what I would feel. You know what I mean? Just this love and gratitude, and it'd be overwhelming.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, I absolutely, it really would.
It would.
Yeah, so.
I think about that all the time. Like, I don't know if you ever go to adoration or if you sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament, but I do often. Like, I have a little date with Jesus every Saturday morning, and I go in and I feel so close with him, in that moment. And I imagine him like sitting on the altar, kind of like sitting there.
Yeah.
Like just kind of sitting there waiting for me. Yeah. But I just think if we could all have that image when we're in Mass, that he's like standing right there. Do you realize how packed our churches would be if because he is there? Yeah. He is right there. But
Absolutely.
people aren't like envisioning that. They're forgetting. They're like, I don't know what they're doing actually. I can't speak for other people, but it's like if you can envision that he's right there, imagine if there was a phone call right now and everybody said, do you know what? Jesus is actually at Our Lady of the Assumption Church standing on the altar.
Right.
But he is there.
Yeah.
He's there every day.
Absolutely.
All day, every day. So, I just think I would do the same. It's like you almost wouldn't know what to do. You wouldn't even need to say anything almost.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What could words do to make that moment any better?
That's amazing. Well, I'm so glad you came today. Is there anything that you didn't get to say that you would like to say before I let you go?
Yeah. I think, one of the things that I find is when you're on your road to conversion, there are so many questions that get peppered at people about Catholicism, about the history, about the doctrine, everything else. And I think that what I heard Bishop Barron say was really important. He said, like, faith seeking understanding, not faith dependent upon understanding. And that's really important because, God tells us to, love God with all of our heart, soul, and mind, right? And strength and mind. The mind is in there. So what's beautiful about Catholicism is you don't have to set reason aside. Like everything has an answer, but you can't get to it all at once.
Right.
It's 2,000 years, this, that, and everything else. Eventually you have to just submit.
Right.
You know what I mean? And once, so get your questions answered, but then just love the Lord, because what the first thing Jesus said when he was resurrected is, peace be with you.
Right.
And that's to me, that's how I found that peace, was just, at first I was trying to find every answer and researching, and I still do, but it's, again, faith seeking understanding.
Right.
And I can always rely on just, like, if I don't understand it, I know it's within the catechism of the Catholic Church, I mean, I'm protected and guided by the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And that's how I find peace and getting answers at the same time.
Well, and I do think we're never going to know everything. We're constantly learning, and that's great. But I do think there's times where it's like, we don't have to always have the answer. We just need to trust and believe. And we live in such a cynical world, and people are always trying to find fault or find the, where it's like, oh, that didn't happen. And there's none of that. And that's the sad part, is when you can surrender to the Lord and give your life to him and just say, I don't know what's going to happen. You do. I say that a lot.
Absolutely right.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for coming. I've really enjoyed this interview, and I think it's very inspiring to people. I think you're a really good role model to your boys and to men in general, and I appreciate that about you. So,
thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
I know. I'm so excited. I have a real fan sitting here. Okay. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming today. Thank you. Love you. Bye.